It's okay. Chevy Tahoe. Big.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting for October 26th. We call the meeting to order at 6:30. And the first order of business is approval of the October 12th minutes, but we are actually going to table that since we haven't received those yet. So we'll do that at our next meeting. Next order of business is public comment. Is there anybody here for public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to our student representative report. And Ms. Boyle actually informed us that she is having a lot more fun than we are here. She's up at Boston College for the day, so we hope to hear about that at our next meeting. So she's going to report then, and we get to move right along to recognitions. And before I pass my recognitions over to Mr. Carpenter, I'd like to recognize our newest member, Ms. Joanne Sheehan. And she was appointed, I was going to say elected. She was appointed at our joint meeting with the Chatham Board of Selectmen and the 3 other Chatham members on Tuesday night. So welcome.
Thank you.
And we look forward to working with you. And hopefully those 2 boys over there will play nice. Be careful. Maybe a couple elbows every now and then. So. All right, and so we'll pass our recognitions off to Mr. Carpenter.
These will be quick. So I would like to thank the Art Charity for a donation of $481.20 to support the high school handbell choir that needed replacement of the protective pads for the handbells, and to the Friends of Pleasant Bay for $390 to assist with travel costs to the Wildlife Refugee Center. And then if I can just sort of jump onto the item number 1 and maybe pass it off to Mark if he'd like to come up and just chat about another thing that the Art Charity is doing or helping us with the middle school.
All right, so we're going to jump right into our reports and discussions, which is the in-state field trip for the entire Monomoy Middle School. Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Mark Wilson, principal of Monomoy Middle School. I just want to thank the Art of Charity for helping to sponsor an all-school field trip. This is our 3rd annual trip up to the Wheelock Family Theater in Boston. We began 3 years ago in the trip up to see Mary Poppins, last year to see Billy Elliot, and this year to see In the Heights as part of our strategic mission to be able to build some unique experiences and find the identity for our school. So we're very excited to be able to go, and we thank them for the support.
Excellent. Any questions or anything for Mr. Wilson? All right, thank you. Have fun.
Since this is an in-state trip, it doesn't need school committee approval, but it's also, I think, a special thing. We just wanted to at least share the knowledge of it.
It's very impressive to take the entire student body all in one trip for one day. Bless you. The parents thank you, but so thank you for doing that. All right, so we will move on to our nurse report. Hello.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Cheryl Defoe. I'm the school nurse here at Monomoy High School, and I'm also the nurse leader for the district, new to the position of nurse leader this year. I'm just here to present nursing report for the 2016-2017. We're looking at data from the 2016-2017 school year, and I'll be brief. Not too many slides. So here at Monomoy, the goals of the health services is to advance the well-being, the academic success, and lifelong achievement of our district students. We try to provide seamless, comprehensive health care to the students and youth of our district as part of a coordinated school health program, and also to be a critical link between the health and educational communities. And I should have started with, I did provide a report, and it is detailed. I tried to just highlight, the key points here with the PowerPoint. So what do we do as school nurses? We do provide a lot of Band-Aids and ice and TLC, but our primary job is to provide direct care to students. We do conduct screenings and referrals for various health conditions. Part of the screening process through Massachusetts general law, we have to provide, we provide vision, hearing, body mass index, scoliosis screening, and we also this year are starting what's called SBIRD, and it is a preventative drug intervention screening. There's been a law passed March of 2016, and it is it's a verbal screen that we will be providing to students in a confidential manner, grades, well, they want 2 grades, ages 12 and up. So we will be looking at 7th grade at the middle school and 9th grade at the high school. Nurses are running those teams. We've been trained. So we've sent nurses with our adjustment counselor, school psychologist. So there's a plan in place to implement those screenings starting in January. In addition to that, we're on the front lines of disease surveillance. We're tracking immunizations. We are, monitoring for flu symptoms. Any reportable disease we have to report to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. We look to them for guidelines if we are confronted with something that's out of the norm and that is reportable. We are here to promote health education. We are the leaders for health in our district. We are also responsible for health policy and program development, and also help influence system change within the district. We are also primarily a direct link between the school personnel, families, healthcare professionals, and the community at large. This slide here talks about, it's the framework for the 21st century of school nursing practice. It was developed by the National Association of School Nurses. If you look into the center of the diagram, you're going to see that our goal is to provide care for students and for their, how they relate with their family and with the community. Our goal is to keep students safe, healthy, and ready to learn. We look at 4 principles surrounding that. We look at leadership, quality improvement, community and public health, and care coordination. What we do every day, we incorporate all of those principles while we take care of our children in the school district. So this year, we have last year's numbers, 2016-17, there were 1,876 students, I believe, enrolled in the district overall. For the 2016-17 year, we saw 26,073 students, and through our data collection, we had a return to class rate of about 93%. So our goal is to keep these kids in the classroom and ready to learn, like I said previously. So here we're just looking at what type of health encounters that we see students for. If you look at the label, at the diagram for illness, we're seeing last year we saw 8,614 kids. This is basically them coming in with sore throats, GI distress, different various illnesses. The health maintenance falls under chronic care, students with diabetic, students that have diabetes, students with asthma. We saw 4,642 students in that category. Injury, the second highest, 6,172. Our behavioral health, that's at 1,000. I have a slide on behavioral health, so I'll get back to that in a few. But in the other category falls mainly with anything from parent-guardian contacts to just kids coming in for various reasons, whether they just need a Band-Aid, routine first aid, but essentially that falls into another category that we can't really always capture in the other encounters. This is interesting. So student encounters by school and the total enrollment by school. So if you look at Harwich Elementary School, their enrollment is 576 students. That was last year. And that's a very busy office. They saw 10,676 kids. So as you can imagine, there's really not a whole lot of time for the nurse to take care of herself over there. Chatham Elementary, we have an enrollment last year of 278 students, and their total encounter was 4,192. At the middle school, we had 4,400 students, and we had, we had an enrollment of 425 with encounter of 4,400 students. And at the high school, we are at 597 for an enrollment last year and saw about 6,805. So the top special health care needs, I will say we've come a long way since the early 1900s. We are seeing a lot of children with more and more, medical conditions. So some of the things we see here at the in the district, students with asthma, life-threatening allergies, diabetes, seizure disorders, cardiac diagnoses, autoimmune disorders, neurological conditions, blood disorders, cancer. There's others that come along. I'm just trying to think. So we had last year 285 students that had a special health care need that was documented and known to the school nurses. I'm sure there were plenty others out there that we haven't come across yet. So what do we do for these kids? These are some of the nursing assessments and interventions that are used in the health offices. Blood glucose tests. Those students with diabetes need to take insulin. They need to calculate their carbohydrates prior to taking their medications. So we have to help them with that. Neurological assessments, those could be chronic or acute. Students present to us with concussion symptoms, especially at the high school with the sports management. We're monitoring cardiac, blood pressure, respiratory assessments, wound assessments, everyday injuries, first aid, and we also are serving students for behavioral and mental health needs. We're also here for the staff as well. So our behavior and emotional concerns, what are we looking at now? At the district, we're looking at many students with ADHD and ADD, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, autism spectrum disorder, a lot of PTSD and trauma, and other behavioral emotional concerns that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. How are we working with these kids as far as their behavioral health? We use behavioral health assessments in the nurse's office. Definitely utilize coping, enhancement, reassurance, check-in. We do have a lot of kids that just come down just for behavioral health check-in once or twice a day. Anti-bullying interventions, stress, anxiety reduction, monitoring kids for self-harm and suicide ideation, working on social skills, relationship guidance, and substance abuse assessments. We do work very closely with our guidance counselors and our adjustment counselors, school psych, and administration for these concerns. Just back to the behavioral health of the kids with the behavioral health issues, we had noted about 348 categories had behavioral health diagnoses last year. And I will say back to that 1,000 number of visits that we had, I think that's underreported by us. So I think we need to do a better job capturing that. We were at about 3.8% of our visits for behavioral health. I feel like we do document, when kids are in crisis or near crisis, but day to day, we see a lot of students coming in with stomach aches, headaches, a lot of somatic complaints that we need to do a better job determining if it's medical related or more anxiety or mental health issues. And so data collection. How did I get all of these slides? Well, we do a lot with our data collection. So why is it important to us in the nurse's office? It's definitely, to provide accurate and precise healthcare documentation. We track student assessments and referrals as far as all of those state mandated screenings that we have to provide. We track student behaviors, students at risk. Gives us the opportunity to identify health trends over time, including outcomes. Gives us an increased understanding of healthcare needs in the school setting for future planning, and the availability of data resources for legal and/or administrative purposes. And we also support student success. So as nurses, we are helping with the individual healthcare plans for students. We are part of the 504 planning teams, and we are involved in writing the accommodations for those students. We write emergency action plans. We're a part of the student support team. We communicate with parents and guardians on a regular basis, and we provide health education, oral health, infection control, hand washing, nutrition, Lyme prevention, sun safety, concussion. Essentially every encounter we have with a student, we try to use as health promotion and education. So that's my presentation. Does anyone have any questions before I close? Yes.
Not so much of a question, but just a thank you. I think that presentation merely touched on what the district's nurses do, and it's a huge, huge piece and very important for our students. So I just want to say thank you very much for all you do. It's a lot of work and also very important. The only question I did have, and you had kind of mentioned it as well, is the Harwich Elementary School encounters number was so high. Was there something going on last year?
I wish Sam was here.
Do we even really know? I mean, I know flu last year was pretty bad. This
think,
also includes like lice, I mean, all that stuff, so.
I think historically, that's in a busy health office. And I looked at the data this year, so for September, I think we were at about 850 visits for the month of September. And you figure, that first week, we really weren't in school. So it's a busy office. She's seeing about 75 to 80 kids a day.
It'd be interesting to see if we could further dip into those numbers and understand, extrapolate out why, and if there's something that we can do from the outside looking in.
Absolutely.
To cut down the amount of visits to your office, but also understanding what's going on.
Right, and we do have a new nurse at Harwich Elementary this year, Carol Fiacco, and she's looking very closely at that. The school that she came from, they also collected data, so she is really looking at those numbers. Again, she's transitioning into a new role in the busiest building, but and being new as the nurse leader, I'm hoping to get over there and offer her supports and try to determine why, why and how we can maybe educate some of the staff, if that's what the case is, or what's an appropriate nurse's visit, versus what is not.
Like, what's happening?
No candy, no more ice cubes unless it's, an acute injury. It's a little bit of work to be done. So maybe next year we'll see that number go down some. That's our goal.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Cheryl. Very thorough and nice way to give a report out. A question. With these categories, are they Commonwealth-wide institutionalized?
Yes.
Okay, so interesting, much like cognitively the MCAS, another happy note, we can compare that with, say, the districts on the Cape.
Yes.
And say, what are we doing well? So you have an opportunity in the next few months to take a look at how the districts are, size and age, and say that we're on par with all the youngsters in the elementary that go at these hundreds of numbers. So I was interested in that, so that's...
So, yes.
Israelites.
In Massachusetts, we... our district, we are part of the Essential School Health Services Grant, which is, I did explain that in the report that I gave you, but we do receive funding from the Department of Public Health to be part of this grant. Monomoy, we hold the grant, and that's part of my nurse leader position is to manage those funds. We also have 2 partner schools, Mashpee and Martha's Vineyard Regional High School. And part of being in that grant is that we collect this data. So many of the Massachusetts schools are involved in that grant. So I think Massachusetts is on the front lines of collecting data if you compare us to other parts of the country. And again, I'm new to this role this year, but that is something that I'm very interested in and hope that I can, like I said, report back more next year.
Thanks.
So in the different buildings, is there one nurse for each office, or a nurse and assistant nurse, or how does that work?
So there's a full-time nurse in every building, and with this nurse, with our grant, so at the high school right now, because I'm the nurse leader, we're considered a full-time, but I'm job sharing with a young lady, Joanne Hinesley. So we do have the full-time equivalent in each building. So the days that I'm doing the nurse leader responsibilities, Joanne should be doing the direct student care. We also have a full-time nursing assistant in the district who floats between the buildings. And then we have a part-time, a .4 health assistant also, which is 80% paid for by the grant. We pay for it out of our grant funding. So, but they're just there to support the nurses. I mean, we can't really delegate anything that has anything to do with making assessments on students coming in. So it's primarily the nurse.
Well, it's really impressive, all the expansive thing. When I was at Chatham Elementary 10 years ago or something, I'd go in and that, because I was the counselor, the nurse's office was pretty busy. And some of these things were done unofficially, but I don't think anything was counted. But there's a lot paperwork to do besides this and calling home because of things that parents needed to know about. So when I do see that about Harwich Elementary, I just wonder how on earth it gets done with one person. But I think it's wonderful. I'd love to come in and talk with you more because there are too many questions for this meeting. I don't want to tie everybody up.
Well, I'd like to invite any of you to stop by anytime. But, you know, just,
When we're feeling well.
yeah, well, either way. We have, you know, we have had a few visitors that have needed our attention as well. So when we're in the building, we're in the building. So,
Thank you so much.
so
for
well,
all
thank
you're
you
doing.
for having me and for letting me take the time to explain what we do. And thank you, Mr. Carpenter and Melissa McGuire, my director, and for all the building principals and staff for supporting us and helping us keep our kids safe. So appreciate your time.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we move on to the FY19 budget discussion. And after Chatham, almost a week and a half ago, we kicked off budget season with the towns by having Chatham's Budget Summit, which we've done for several years, which was a great, just being able to see where Chatham's coming from on their town side with budget. So we're working into our budget season with a beginning of a budget discussion. Continue what we started last week.
Yes, okay. Just things that have happened since last we've met. Katie and I continue our sort of monthly conversations with both town managers and both finance directors in a joint sort of finance meeting that we have monthly. So, so we've been having these conversations. We met this week and have also started our process on working with each of the principals and each of the administrators. So we've met with Robin this morning to start discussing Chatham Elementary's budgets and what Chatham Elementary needs, and met with Sam and Mary over at Harwich Elementary a couple days ago to start that. And we'll be meeting with Bill and Mark to talk about middle school and high school, and we'll see Jim, and we'll talk with the athletic director. So we'll hit all of those budget conversations over the course of the next couple of weeks. Where each of them are coming with, here are some things that we think we need that are different in the budget, or things that we might be able to have some savings in this area, add here. But where we left things off with this group last time we met are there things that from on the school committee side, Katie and I should be keeping in mind as we develop the first iteration of the budget, because it's always easier to come put it in the first iteration and bring it back and have the discussions on what can we afford to do given our fiscal wherewithal in the towns, and look at what do we need to pare back, then to say, okay, here's our number, now what do we have to pare back so we can add something in later on.
This step.
I guess what my interest would be to see if we could get more government, and also to replace whatever what we used to have in health that's been taken out. I'd like to have that restored, because I see it as an essential thing and related to the opioid crisis.
So health classes that may not be here anymore, and government, we're talking high school level?
Yes. We've already talked before about the SCL, and so of course whatever the SCL group wants to refer. I'd love to see classes next year, but according to our agenda, it might be model programs or something. I'm not sure. Ms. McGuire would know better than I on that.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add into budget conversations? Well, that's an easy list.
Oh, but
Krista.
I mentioned last time about the strategic plan, because that would be a budget to hire a person to come down and run that.
I think that's coming up on our agenda.
Oh, okay. I didn't look that far ahead, I guess. Thank you.
Again, easy list. All right. Mr. Carpenter, do you have anything else you want to add to that
That's it.
motion? All right, so we will move on to the regional agreement workshop planning. So in looking over the goals that we voted on for our committee, I realized that we need to get moving on a couple of them because of my promise that we are going to accomplish and meet our goals. And one of those is the regional agreement that we began kind of talking and looking at last year, but we really need to start focusing on that more. And Mr. Carpenter's kind of started that a little bit with conversations revolving around Chatham Elementary School. But also there was a couple of assessing of capital costs versus debt service is in there. And those are conversations that we needed to have about with the towns. And then we had a conversation about possibly changing the quorum if we are ever down a member. So those were some of the three conversations that we were having last year. My thought and what we also, actually no, what we passed with our goals is that we were going to have a workshop with us, and then we were going to have a workshop with the selectmen all in the month of November, which is next month. So conveniently enough, we only have one school committee meeting in November. So in my genius planning, I was thinking that what if we had a school committee workshop regarding the regional agreement on November 9th, which would be the non-school committee meeting, and then try to schedule a workshop with the selectmen for both Chatham and Harwich on the 30th, which is another non-school committee meeting night. And then we have a school committee meeting on November 16th. So it would be the 9th, the 16th, and then the 30th to try to get workshops in. You're all diligently writing it in your calendar, so I'm assuming you agree with me.
Well, I've written these school committee meetings wrong on my calendar. Figure that out.
Yeah, mine are wrong, the same as yours.
I have that we have school committee on the 9th and the 30th.
No way.
Yeah,
That's
that's what I have
So
written
I
down.
will,
Well, that just blows my theory.
I'm so on that,
But I
feel
looked
that
at the
I might-
calendar.
Yeah.
I'll have to look again. All
Okay.
right, so hold that thought.
holding. I'm so glad I'm
We
the
could
only one.
reference the school calendar.
I'm pulling out my committee calendar. Oh, look at there. Darn it. I really don't like it when I'm wrong, especially when I'm wrong very publicly.
First time.
So how about a workshop on November 16th, because that's a non-school committee night. How would that work?
Yeah.
Great. That sounds excellent to me. So November 16th, we'll have a workshop with us to discuss what we would like to see, and what I kind of envision is we would do as much as we can legwork-wise on the regional agreement. And then, so the last time we met with the selectmen, we went and just said, what should we do? And looking through it, what changes do you think we should have, what changes we think we should have. But at this time, I think it would be helpful if we go into the meeting with the changes, a rough draft of our changes already ready. That's kind of what I'm thinking, and it's open for discussion as to what you might think about that. Does that sound, so at the first workshop, if we can kind of get through the better part of a rough draft to bring to the selectmen?
Yes.
Do you have the rough draft we put together last year?
I do,
Good place to start.
yes. I actually have several rough drafts, and I started my own rough draft, which, based on my dates, I might have to go back and look at those rough drafts again. Yeah, I swear I looked at the calendar right.
Well, the only other option would be to add one of.
This long?
Thursday, sorry, the only other option would be to add one on Thursday the 2nd, which is next Thursday. If you wanted an additional one in November.
Ms. Depp, has issue
That
with,
is during the mask conference. I don't know how many of us are going to.
Yeah, I can't
And also,
think of-
there's something going on there at the high school for meeting with parents, staff, families, and community on that particular day.
okay.
So I'm not sure if that's the best day.
Okay. Mr. Duvall?
If you want to really get it done in November, then maybe we should meet earlier in the month as our body and meet with the selectmen on the 16th.
Well, I did, and my plans were working perfectly until I messed up the school committee meeting calendar. Mr. Russell?
Madam Chair, why don't, my recollection is we've spent several hours reviewing some of these, and they come in the form of a draft that all of us are probably pretty much aware of last year. Joanne and Steve are new to us. I wonder if on the 9th, which we've just discovered there's a school committee meeting, if we were all able to get here an hour earlier, you present the draft, we'd be gaining a meeting, and within that hour, our new members would have a chance to digest them, because frankly, I think the 3 or 4 things that we have discussed were pretty much on plane with some level of understanding for ourselves. So that might gain a meeting or reduce one.
Ms. Depp?
I like the thinking about that, but that conflicts with the wellness committee meeting that's
On
in
the
here.
16th?
That's in here right before that.
I'm sorry. So
On the
Mr. Russell was
9th.
talking about meeting earlier on the 9th.
Right.
In my head, as he was saying that, I was actually thinking, I wonder if the 16th, if we do a first half school committee, second half selectmen, have the selectmen come in after us meeting together? Mr. Duvall?
It would be hard to turn around a document quickly to be able to present to them.
That is true.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I know, Nancy, you're very good with typing these things up, and I'm not sure how much of that we have to do.
It's mostly, so the 3 topics that I brought up were the ones that we had discussed before. And then a lot of the other edits was mostly removing the interim school committee and the preschool committee stuff. That was in the regional agreement. For example, there's nowhere in the regional agreement that actually calls us Monomoy Regional School District, because the regional agreement predates us being named Monomoy. So there's a lot of little edits in there along that lines.
But the other thing that could be done is after the meeting on the 9th, if instead of having that earlier, we could have it after the school committee meeting.
Ms. London said that there is no meeting on the 9th for the wellness.
Oh, there's not? It's in my book.
So
Okay.
apparently your calendar and my calendar are in sync wrong.
Okay, well,
I'm
that's
going
fine.
with it, I'm sticking with it.
Oh, okay, then fine.
So if we meet a little earlier on the 9th, 5:30,
You providing dinner?
I'll bring a power bar or 2. Or I can make sure I have extra leftovers. That's what I normally eat before school committees. Is 5:30 okay on November 9th?
Yep.
So November 9th, we'll start at 5:30 and do an hour workshop before our 6:30 meeting. And then the 16th, where we try to schedule a meeting with the selectmen. If we kind of give them a range of time, is 5:30 the earliest that would work for most?
The 16th, did you say? The selectmen are
Yes.
coming to that meeting?
Yes. So we're going to meet as a school committee as a workshop before the November 9th meeting. And then on the 16th, it will be a workshop with just the selectmen. So we'll give them a little bit of a time cushion, 5:30 or 6, whatever day works better for them. Okay.
Is that are they switching to that night for their
Not
meeting?
until January.
Okay.
Chatham is not
So we'll
switching.
give them a little preview of what it's like.
That's right. Okay, So that'll get us back on track, and that'll help me feel better about meeting our school committee goals.
Did we have a time, or are you going to wait on the selectmen meeting?
For the 16th, it'll 5:30 or 6:30, somewhere in there.
All right.
And we'll kind of get that and nail that down. Does that sound, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Phew, that was painful. Wow. All right.
Madam Chair, one follow-up
Mr. Russell.
on that early pre-meeting to discuss amongst ourselves. Could you get the draft shipped out to?
I would love to.
Thank you. That will hasten our understanding.
Yes, I will send out the most comprehensive draft of changes. I think Mr. Carpenter worked a lot on a lot of the changes. It was color-coded, yellow highlights and greenish highlights, and some red in there as two things that needed to be taken out and some added in, and then things to look at. So we'll get that out sooner than later. All right. Phew. All right, now we'll move on to the strategic plan process discussion. To kind of work on that as well. That's also in our school committee goals. See, I told you I was going to be on track this year. So there's lots of different options for us to do for the strategic plan this year. And I don't know if Mr. Carpenter has some sort of, you're looking at me with like, look at that face.
We can win this one. I think the conversation that has come up ever since the development of the last strategic plan is, do we want to engage in with a consulting company to come organize sessions, record the feedback that's happening at the sessions, and potentially generate a report after these meetings that might guide the development of the strategic plan. And there are entities that go so far as to, help draft that plan. But all of those involve different levels of financing to do that. So our last go around at the strategic plan was, we'll call it a cost neutral. It didn't cost the district anything, and our former districts at times would spend up to $20,000+ to engage with consultants in that process. And there are companies that that we can go reach out to and bid for. So it's sort of what's the want of the group. And I know that Sharon's raised we should consider putting something into the budget for it. And I think that's where we have to kind of decide is what's our, if we're going to go that route, what's the bottom line? Or as an organization, do you go and work with myself and the administration, and and we facilitate a process much the same way that that an outside vendor would.
Ms. Stout.
So I went to the last one that our administration did, and I went to the one that we may have paid, I don't know, $20,000 for, something. We paid for 2 days for a woman that was amazing. And there were, because every group in, this was only Chatham, but I'm suggesting the same thing for Chatham and Harwich. Every single church, every single group sent somebody. So we had people that were mostly pro and interested in education. There were 2 or 3 people who were interested only in cutting the budget in education and were kind of grumpy people. And at the end, we could have been singing Kumbaya together. And the wonderful thing about that was that partly because it wasn't any familiar person of people that you generally are with, no one cut out early. I'm not saying that, I think she did a better job because that's her full-time job, but I don't think that the one that we did here was anything of a bad job. I just think that there's a real difference when you have somebody that everybody's, a novel person coming in. And to have all those groups together, and it coalesced. And after that day, there were preliminary things put up there. And for 1 year, people from that group volunteered. Like communication was one thing. I don't remember what they all were, but there were 4 or 5 different things that showed up as values. And on those things, people volunteered for those groups, and it was a mixture of school people and outside people. And we met at the end of that year with all the original people, and everyone. There wasn't one person who didn't consider it an A-plus situation. And Amy, who was on our school committee, had that experience too, and she talked favorably about this. So I don't think I'm not a big one for spending money, but in this particular situation, since it's merging the 2 towns, we may feel, certainly the kids feel that we're one, but everyone in the town hasn't quite had the opportunity that the kids have had. And I think you've got people that go back to their groups, and they, are the ones who tell what's gone on. It's just, I think, very, very worthwhile.
Okay. Ms. Richardson.
I do hear the value of having a consultant. My thinking is, could it be done in-house for, say, a few years, and then maybe every so many years have a consultant come in, but work within house for cost-effective measures initially, and then look to a consultant if necessary in future years. Just throwing that out.
Mr. Russell.
I'm not really opposed to having someone come in to guide us in the process. My memory might be a little bit slightly off, but I know we cut about $150,000 starting with VIP's coordinator and adding 2 or 3 other things on last year's budget because we deemed that there wasn't any funding to make that happen. I would be opposed, and I'm not opposed to searching out this group. And I've experienced over my career some very excellent coordination with paid consultants, and I've sat through wasted time. And as recent as 4 or 5 years ago, the 2 districts paid, and I don't know what that was, but let's say it was $10,000. And I thought that was wasted time for those who came to that meeting, and we did not get the results we were looking for. So it's kind of a mixed hit or miss. I myself think the original plan that came about with all its bumps and how best to do it a year and a half ago, I thought was effective. Could it be improved? Sure it can. But I would be very cautious of voting for a $20,000 or a $40,000 expenditure for a 2 or 3 day convocation of the citizenry with something maybe, as Sharon pointed out, and she had outlined it quite well, so maybe we could lean on Sharon to come up with how we can contact more people and get this done with the leadership team we have and maybe save the money. So that's the flip side of the good and the bad on this. So I just caution us, and I'm not saying let's not move ahead and try to find what prices are out there, but I myself would prefer to spend the $20,000 on a nurse's assistant at Howard Elementary School after looking at those figures. So with that said, you can thank me later. So there's the balance, I think, because there's nothing probably wrong about doing it either way, but I think we should be very cautious. Donna's point about moving slowly towards this once we accumulate our own historical data might have some merit. And the other caution in that, it would be to get the original team with more staff and parents, and in the past 2 years, some of those areas have grown. School council at Hyannis East. I'm sorry, that was a kind of a mental, I got myself back there a minute. I'm being treated head nurse. It's not working. Howard Elementary. So with that said, maybe that's the other.
Letters, H-E.
Pardon me?
They were both the same, Hyannis East and Harwich Elementary.
And there's an East Harwich, so you're kind of halfway there.
Thank you. I'll convey that to my counselor. So that's my 4 minutes on the thought of balancing where we headed with this.
Any other, Mr. Duval?
I agree with both of you. And I was going to share that what happened 13 years ago in Chatham to replicate today would cost us about $80,000. Because all in, it was more expensive than the $20,000 that Chatham paid for the facilitator. Chatham Bars Inn donated everything that happened on their end. And that was a big price tag. So, there is a very good place for a good facilitator to really drive this. I just don't think today that we can afford it. I think that with our administrators, they can hold these same things and move us in the right direction.
Any other thoughts? Ms. Long?
Because I guess this is what we're doing, I would say that I mirror Terry and Donna's suggestions, and I do agree with Sharon as well on the importance of the community stakeholders and having a more structured, or I wouldn't say that our strategic plan, the way we do it is not structured, but sometimes when you have a facilitator, it does make things go a little differently, positively or negatively. I've also myself been involved in many strategic plans, and they can go either way. I would not be comfortable taking funding away in the sense of, I feel like there's some other places, and I've seen the budget go up and I've seen the budget get cut, and I would be more comfortable seeing that funding go in other areas, because I feel like we have the team and the ability to do another effective strategic plan. I wouldn't be opposed to looking into grants, perhaps, that we could write for to maybe in 2019 or so to see if we can get some funding that way, and work with someone in the community to support it, other than taking it out of the budget, because the strategic plan itself is very important. But I don't think we're there yet as a district to be able to take those funds and move them in that direction.
Mr. Carter?
I was just going to say, I think that there's also, we could reach out to MASC and see if there are some middle ground here too. I think the bulk that you were paying for, that I think was Chatham Public Schools was paying for at the time, was to have the consultant do a lot of the writing behind the scenes and produce the report. I think you could go and work with somebody who could come and do the facilitating if the want is to have some third party come and facilitate. This group and our teams hearing the same information, and if we're compiling the report ourselves and we're working with either Chatham Bars Inn on a deal or some other locale that makes good fiscal sense for us, that I think there's ways to bridge the wants on different areas too, and I'm happy between now and our next meeting to go and see who people might recommend who could be a sort of Phil Donahue. Aging myself there probably, but
It was an awkward suggestion.
As long as you didn't say Jerry Springer. Ms. Stowe?
So I'm very happy to hear that it's very difficult as a person who's been in something and see people evolve to express that to people that haven't been in that experience. So I feel really grateful that people are really trying to hear that. I also look at this as trying to, I talk about getting the communities involved. And we have a lot of the staff here, the administrative staff especially, does a lot of outreach things. what happens with them is that 7 people will come, or maybe a little more, or whatever, but it's parents.
Sometimes I'd be happy with 7.
I know, that's what I mean. And with this type of thing, which I think I'm hearing that maybe we're all in agreement of having the format be the same type of thing where we reach out into the community and have representatives from all of these groups, because that is, I hear from high school all the time, we've got a family here. And I don't hear that just from administration, I hear it from students. And that's what we need to get to with our communities. And those communities are going to be funding us. So when we're talking about not spending money, I don't mean just goodwill, but the good information that's coming back and feeling a part of this can translate into people feeling more comfortable in paying for some of the things, a more trust factor in being involved with the school. So I like what Scott said about looking into something that's partway. I'm definitely not interested in anything that's going to cost $8,000. Possibly could be 1 day instead of 2. I don't know, but I like the idea of looking to see what there is, because it has to be somebody very effective that does this kind of thing for it to be pulled off. So anyway, I'm very pleased that we're moving in a direction where we all seem to be more comfortable with. Thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Sharon captures that. I think there is unanimity here about some type of gathering to launch a second phase of this. But I'd be interested in, a lot of people here, at least which us, have spent a lot of time creating the present strategic plan. And it's been launched a year and a half ago, and we've had reportage all this year. I would like to make certain that we have some data results in a year or two that we can, for example, the high school is about to be evaluated New England-wide in another year or so with all that process. Out of that will come a report. The DS report last year, all of this will give us, along with the strategic plan, an opportunity to say, what's the prime reason for doing all this? One student in all the 1,800 other kids will have some significant sign of learning growth. And that's what this is all about. And so I'd like to think in a year or 2 from now, because it hasn't really been a full year, to be able to say, we're seeing it, or something's not working. So, again, however we procedurally go about relaunching the phase 2 of this, I think that's the goal that we all need to make certain we make a benchmark of.
Ms. Stout?
And if we're comparing the one that I was at and what happened here last strategic plan time, we're comparing apples and oranges somewhat, because what happens when you have a group of people that are from the community and staff is more like we value foreign language or health or I don't know, different things. And it's not in like we want to do a certain type of math. And some of what came out of this strategic plan that was done is a step beyond that, because to putting in things like map evaluation tools and all, people that are in that don't have any of that knowledge to be able to do that more detailed level of strategic plan. So it would be...
So your thought is a more umbrella-like strategic plan versus the one we have been working on for the past 2 years, was more detail-oriented.
Yes. One doesn't exclude the other. It's that the one that the community would, for instance, the woman that came, I mean, it was a while ago, so I don't remember all the details, but I remember her saying, what do you value? And then people called out, not called out in random order, but she took up information from what people said and put it up. And then it kind of boiled down to certain themes, like communication was one. I think foreign language might have been another. And then people took their little sticky things, and they got maybe 4 of them or something, and they put it up there, and it went into that. And so these are broad ideas that are values that could come from community people, not the detailed things that would come from administration. So I'm just trying to make it a little more clear and not to take the whole lead here.
Mr. Gardner?
And I just want to try to emphasize when we were putting together the strategic plan that's expiring at the end of this year, we were following models that DESE and the State Superintendent's Association sort of put out there with a very clear focus on what will improve teaching and learning. And I sometimes worry that that strategic plans start diverting from what's the thing that really matters at the end of the day. And I think when we get to the MCAS results, I think it's somewhat of a testament that things are tracking in the right direction. It's at the end of the day, it's all about strategically how can we leverage certain things to most see gains on that learning front, and that's what we tried to do. Be it seeing improvement on the social emotional learning, or improvement in the academic program, or what's happening extracurricularly.
Yeah. So I would see that as the second step to that they both have values.
I would agree that it seems like it would almost be a 2-day process, where the first day is having all the community members to come in and have the umbrella of where they would like to see focus, and then day 2 would be more, how are we actually going to do this? And how are we going to push the achievement forward in academics, and how is it going to impact the students' learning? So it's trying to meld those two together to make it come out. Because I agree with what Terry was saying about the last strategic plan, or the current strategic plan, is very, I'd say, not just student-centered, but it's very academic standard-centered to try to push the district forward in a positive way. And while it's great to have a community member say, I really value foreign language, and what can we do with foreign language, it's a whole different, or even as go to math. I value math, and we need to improve our math scores. Yes, we know that. How are we going to do that? Well, we need to implement a new math curriculum. And those community members aren't the ones that are going to help implement that new math program, albeit they're going to be the ones to help pay for the new math program. So we want them to feel in that sense. So it's trying to find that balance of having them get involved and see what we're doing and grasp all that we're doing in these buildings, and yet also allow the people who we pay good money to figure out how they're going to do it. So I don't know.
It might be a workshop issue to bring up.
Yeah. Mr. Russell.
Just to follow up, and this is my thought as far as it maybe captures some of what Sharon is experiencing 12 years ago. Large group gatherings, and if you had a goal of making certain that our community, Chatham Howard, all kind of coalesced around a common climate, a common culture, a common value. And so you have an initial gathering where someone comes in and consults with you and plans to launch it that way. Very reasonable. Business models do this all the time. They send their business folks to what they might call a retreat. And these folks come home all excited, stimulated about that was a good experience. However, that's just the beginning, because they have to go back to their individual departments, i.e. schools. So you have a department called Chatham Elementary School, Howard Elementary School, middle school in Monomoy High School. I really believe that it's up to that group to take what's been initially launched and begin to create a climate not identical to the other three, but that has this positive thrust, this energy that creates light within the high school. That's what our principal, part of what his whole job is. And the same way with the principal of the three other schools. That creates a climate of morale or a culture that then will enhance any strategic plan around what the troops are going to do. You know, in the spiritual sense, churches do the same thing. They might send off a cadre to a retreat, and then you come back home all excited about this new motivation that I have. And yet the real success is once they get within their own church halls and begin to work with their kids in CCD or youth groups or whatever it might be. That's when the result will start to show. Because singleton two-day experiences, as we all know, they wear out. And it's the individual support that each school will begin to create a vibrant student council, school council with parents. And how do you measure that vibrancy? That's the beginning of a good school climate. And then you see that move forward. So all in favor of encounters with large groups, but there's got to be something more to that. And I think it falls within the realm of all of the leaders within classrooms in those four schools and the leader there being the principal and the superintendent overseeing this as someone who would continue to inject climate improvement and culture improvement. So that might be a thought of how you relaunch another strategic plan and make that more positive for all of us.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? So where do we want to go from here? Do we want to have Mr. Carpenter look into having a full leader? I just lost the word. Facilitator. Do we want to look into having us determining a template to work off of? Where do we want to go from here to move this the new strategic plan forward? Ms. Stout?
I'd love to see what the options are for consultants and money and what high recommendations they have for effectiveness.
So you want to look into having a full consultant take care of the package, just to see what that cost would be?
Yeah, they can break it down. Many consultants have a minimum that they need to do in order to come down, but as Mr. Carpenter said, I think the last person did do a lot of write-ups and stuff like that, and the groups themselves did, the volunteers themselves did some of that, but at least it's a starting point.
Mr. Carpenter?
I'm pretty sure the firm that did Chatham's plan that Sharon's referring to is still out there, and we could go and ask them for how much for the whole enchilada, and then
break it down.
And then if we were to say, okay, what if we're doing a lot of the wedding planning and right up afterwards, but we need a consultant for 2 days.
We just need you to officiate. Does that sound good? And then we can bring it back up at the next meeting?
Sure.
Good enough?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we move on to our 2017 MCAS results from Mr. Carpenter. Gonna warm up your computer.
So I just want to share sort of a quick reflection back on sort of the MCAS data. So if you go onto DESI's website and you pull up the data for the first year that I came down here, where we were still operating with 6 schools. So we had Chatham High School, Chatham Middle School, Chatham Elementary School, and Harwich High School, Harwich Middle School, Harwich Elementary School, and you look at what the MCAS results look like for the district then. I think for now if we just focus on the far right column and just look to see where I've highlighted the boxes in yellow. So the boxes in yellow are the student growth percentage, which is a percentile, which sort of an indication of how well our kids are progressing relative to their academic peers in the state. So if that number is at 50, we would be seeing our students growing at the state average. I've highlighted in yellow all of the boxes that are below 50 because those are sort of indication that, hey, in these areas we're growing less than the state average. And you'll kind of notice that between our third grade, or between fourth grade all the way up to eighth grade, about half of the exams that were administered had growth less than that state average. And down at the very bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that at the end of all of the English tests, all of the math tests, we were just above the state average. And we were just above the state average because at grade 10, we had some high growth, 66, 65, and that helped pull for that year all of the tests up above that 50%, that 50% mark. And that's what we were seeing, with the two towns, that, we were seeing our elementary, middle school scoring, scores were slightly below the state average, and then the high school, there was a little bit of a rebound, and we kept ending just above the state average. So then if I scroll down to the following year, pretty much the same, pretty much that same trend. So we weren't fully physically consolidated yet. And we're seeing many or most of those exams being below that state average. And again, at 10th grade, there's this sort of rebounding that we see happening at the 10th grade, the 10th grade numbers. And then if you look at where we are 4 years later, 2017, we have only one grade level and in one subject area that the growth percentile was below 50, and many of those growth scores in many of the grade levels we're now seeing are in the 60s, and even we're seeing some hit into the 70s. I mean, I think for me, part of my frustration might be right in here. These are the two numbers, the 10th grade English and 10th grade math. What's the total percent of students that are meeting or exceeding expectations, or at least in the case, these are the 10th grade. The 10th grade numbers are still the advanced and proficient because it's a legacy MCAS test there. But those two numbers really haven't changed over the numbers that we saw in the previous years. If we go back to before we brought the district fully together. But what I've been sharing with people is, if you think that now we're growing each year higher than the state average, it'll be very interesting to watch, I think, as we get into the next few years. We should start to see that 10th grade number start leaping forward, because the kids are growing above the state average in these years. So I think it's a really good sign that things are heading in the right direction. And I think, again, it's somewhat of a testament to some of the things that we've been putting in place in the district to monitor, using those MAP tests to monitor how we're seeing our kids grow, if we're not seeing the growth there, what sort of supports can we provide to both students and to the teachers? And I know that our principals, are looking at the growth scores that are happening in each of their buildings and breaking them down and having conversations with teachers about the growth that they're seeing in their classrooms. So, so I know that, that these are heading in a really great direction in a short period of time. And I, while I'm frustrated that that 10th grade absolute number, hasn't really changed, over the last 4 years, I think what we're seeing is everything's in line there to see that change quite quickly.
Any questions for Mr. Carpenter? All right. Ms. Stout?
I may be incorrect, but did this year's MCAS, was there a bump up on expectations compared to these other ones?
So the state would go and say that comparing the grades 3 through 8 is a little bit, like comparing apples and oranges, or maybe it's like comparing Macintosh apples to Red Delicious apples, because they're the next generation test is what's happening in 2017, and you have the categories there are meeting or exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting, versus advanced, proficient, and the percentages of students that would qualify for each of those don't completely align between the two tests, and that's why if we just kind of jump to the growth, growth is growth, and if we look at are we growing above the state average or below the state average, I think that's one place that you can look at the number and say things are heading very positively.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Anybody else? I appreciate the email that came along with this, explaining it and understanding the student growth percentile. And while the student growth percentile is vastly improved, it's still a little concerning of the higher end, the meeting expectations and the exceeding expectations, because you'd like to see those numbers a lot higher. And I think that I agree that a lot of the things that we've put in place recently in the last year and a half, it'd be interesting to see the results, and especially with the MAP testing and how that's going, and then with the extra initiatives that are happening at the middle school and the high school specifically to help those students that are on the partially meeting expectations and getting them up. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the next years, because I think that will be really telling as to what we've put in. I feel like the rain is going to fall through the glass above us right now. So thank you for all of this information, and look forward to seeing next year's. Mr. Russell.
Follow up, Scott, and I agree. Those right-hand growths, that's a good sign, and we can interpret how come until the cows come home. Speak to us a little bit about the present the 8th grade group and that score of 40. What would be your quick thought as to what's going on there?
Well,
You're the first year of the 8th grade coming to the high school last year?
No. So this isn't the first year. It's not the first year that we've had 8th grade at high school. Yeah. So it's so I think that's a spot where and I know Bill has already started to have conversations with Mary Hemme and the math department head, and her group are breaking out from a curriculum standpoint. Where were the students doing stronger? Where do they need to improve? And that I know also that Bill and his team are looking at just the students in the classes, and what sort of trends are we seeing in the classrooms, and what sort of supports might we need to provide for the teachers in professional development to help bolster that number, or what additional supports might we need to provide for our, for our eighth graders. I think from a curriculum standpoint, we want to make sure that we're covering in eighth grade math all of the topics that need to be covered, and we have appropriate pacing, so we're hitting everything in a time frame that's going to have our kids prepare for that that test. So you want to kind of look at it from that point, but also look at it, how do you support ultimately the teachers in front of the room, so that they're having those are better results in the end.
Good, thanks.
Any other questions? I have a quick question about eighth grade math, because we've talked about it a lot, specifically with the new Math and Focus curriculum, and trying to kind of shift the endpoint prior to high school. So my question would be more along the lines of the eighth grade MCAS test is not assuming the kids have taken algebra. So how much algebra is in that we haven't gotten
so
to?
I think we have to keep in mind that eighth grade math score are kids that didn't have any Math and Focus. Because Math and Focus isn't at eighth grade. So this year's the kids that will take the MCAS this year will be kids that had Math and Focus in seventh grade. Because last year was our first year. So that's on some level a baseline number for what what happens before Math and Focus, and I think as we see the progressive cohorts come up, we're going to see what happens if you've had Math and Focus for 1 year, and then what if you've had it for seventh and sixth grade, and then seventh, sixth, and fifth grade. So you're going to see hopefully by the time we see this this whole movement of all these cohorts up, that we're going to see that number go up more. Just quick sharing, that Carl and I and Sam and Mary were in classrooms at Harwich Elementary, looking at a lot of kids doing Math and Focus, and one of the neat things was to go into second grade classrooms doing Math and Focus, and seeing them doing tasks that just 2 years earlier they would have been doing in third grade. And so one of the things we've talked about is we needed to kind of sort of change the math program and change the sequencing and pacing and everything, so that we were essentially picking up a year so that our students were algebra ready by the time they're in eighth grade, not algebra ready by the time they're in ninth grade. And so it was neat to see kids doing three-digit math addition at this point you're in second grade, when that was something that was typically happening starting in third grade just 2 years prior.
Mr. Russell?
I thought this graded question would be brief, but it does intrigue me, and I think we're off to a good start. It's really a Mary question, but maybe Bill can answer it, or Scott, you could. In the grade 8, there's about 100 youngsters in the grade level, plus or minus 100.
Yep.
And I don't know if there's 2 teams of 50 or one team. One, are the kids' ability grouped in that 8th grade for math? And 2, if they are, is there a one Algebra 1 section in that 8th grade?
Yeah, there is some ability grouping in 8th grade, but the 2 teams have both sort of do you call it accelerated and the regular 8th grade math. So it's not that one team has all the accelerated kids and the other team right.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Mr. Burkhead.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Burkett, principal of Monomoy High School, and I was prepared to discuss this question because that number sticks out to all of us. Obviously, it's concerning. It's unacceptable. Please know that we get the data out early, before parents and before it's given out to the media, so we have an opportunity to kind of reflect on it and use it. And we kind of do year-round assessment, and some of the things that we do to address this, to ensure that these numbers go up and that we don't accept them, first of all, is to do an analysis. And basically what we were able to do is MCAS sends out what questions each and every child got wrong, which ones they got correct by grade, by student. So we're able to look, for example, okay, pretty much every kid got question 6 wrong, and it was about variables. Okay, we aren't doing a good enough job teaching variables. We have to improve that. So those conversations have already happened, specifically by grade and by content and subject area. So we already had a head start on knowing, as we started the year, what topics that we weren't doing a very good job at covering because the kids weren't answering them correctly. So that's one set. I know Dr. Blanchard has been meeting with, had our first task force meeting with middle and high school. I don't know if the elementary were involved. 5 through 8, because we've had this discussion about math with in-focus being rolled out and how it would impact the kids coming forward. But just getting those teachers in the room vertically to talk about what's happening at the middle school and what's expected when they leave there coming in for 8th grade. We hadn't had those conversations before, so that's a huge benefit, and they just started. So those conversations are happening too, which will ultimately reflect in our curriculum and what we're able to provide kids and how they score in the assessment. We're also, as Mr. Carpenter said, looking at the student growth data, and we are able to do that by teacher now, to look at what specific teachers are able, kids are scoring in that class by year. For example, how each child grows over time in 1 year with that teacher. So we can specifically drill down, have those specific conversations with teachers that we haven't necessarily had in the past without that access to information. So those are 3 pretty powerful things. We've talked about the map. The map was rolled out in pilot format at the high school in 8 and 9 last year. So we kind of did it, but we didn't get into data like the middle school did. This year, we are able to do that. We've already given our first assessment. The teams are meeting specifically. For example, the 8th grade in our schedule, one of the benefits is that we have team time for those teachers to meet during the school day. And they will specifically be looking at the MAP assessment data in English and math to identify real time what's going on in the classroom with administration and to identify lapses and where kids are strong and weak and where we can improve. So the advantage of that is the MCAS is already too late, right? We get it after the fact. Kids are gone. It's next year. It's October and they get it. So just know that we get it early. We're already on it. MAP assessments will certainly help us connect all this. And then with the task force work going on, connecting our vertical alignment of our curriculum, I think you'll see some improvements in these scores.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Just one more really quick piece of clarity. The reason that you saw 2017 and then the previous grid was 2014, and a understandable question is, Scott, where's 2016? In those intermediate, or in the years in between, we were doing park testing, which would be yet another different exam. So this at least is comparing MCAS to MCAS, even though much of it is comparing new MCAS to old MCAS. But
Anybody else have any other questions?
We got the apple to apple analogy. Okay.
A quick question, and I don't know, it might be too soon for any of this, but since we did do MAP testing last year, more so with the elementary schools and the middle schools, do you notice any correlation between the MAP testing results and the MCAS scores? I mean, is it as an early indication of its usefulness?
I'll defer to Mark.
I see you all jumping up the answers, right? They're fighting, trying to elbow their way in.
Marcos, middle school principal. MAP has not been correlated directly to that next generation MCAS, simply because the test is so new. So they
I was
will
thinking
do a
more
correlation.
like results. Like if you look at the overall 6th grade results last year with the 6th grade MCAS results, do you see any sort of...
We're seeing a correlation between students who score high or high average with those who are crossing the bar of meeting or exceeding expectations of next generation MCAS.
Yeah.
So whether we're using that data in the middle schools, those students who are below the high or high average, we're identifying them for some small group remediation.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you for answering my question perfectly. Just basically wondering, just it kind of emphasizes that the MAP testing is a good thing. It's kind of, it's helpful. And so I was hoping that was your answer. And when you come up and say, no, they were totally different.
So as part of, my goals and what our team's working on, we had our admin meeting, and our little admin professional development group was at Chatham Elementary School, and Robin was doing just that, comparing the MCAS results to the MAP results, and doing, sort of how did things line up for the students. And as we, over the next 3 months, we'll get into have each of the other principals present their data from their schools, and then by the time we get done that, it'll be looking at the MAP testing results for how did growth go for the first half of this year. And so.
Oh, good, thank you. Very excited to see the next year's results then. Any other questions? All right. We'll move on to leases. And in our packets, we have this ICERNIO coming up, and in our packets, we had a leases and financing grid for
Katie Isernio, Business Manager. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So this is actually a good time for us to have a little bit of a conversation, and I need a little bit of direction, and I'll fill you in on the background, and it's wonderful that Cheryl is here tonight. The district needs to go through and update all of our defibrillators, the AED, in all of the schools, and it's going to be a two-phase process. We need to get many, except the ones that were bought new for the high school, up to speed, and we have some old ones in the district. And this whole conversation here tonight came out of a conversation with Karen Gilmet, our athletic director, Cheryl, the nurse leader, Melissa, just to say, we have a need in the district. So we got some pricing for defibrillators, and this past January, Governor Baker also signed in some new legislation regarding the numbers of defibrillators that schools will have to have, and if you have school-sponsored events, what's available. And we will meet that, but we'll also need to purchase additional ones. So I went through the process of procurement, and I was going about my daily procurement regulations and rules and what I'm authorized to pay for and everything. And we're working with this company called Cardiac Science, who will come in and manage the defibrillators and replace them all. And we thought if we were going to do this in a two-phase process, that maybe it would be better to spread it out from a purchasing standpoint. So they offer a financing option that you could finance over 3 or 4 years, and at the end we would own them, and there's a warranty for 8 years. So I was going through the process of doing the purchase order and everything, and then I went to talk about the financing. I went to sign it, and I said to Scott, gee, I'm well within my purchasing authorization from Mass General Law, but I'm signing a 3-year financing, but this is usually we've only had bigger ones, like the scale project. That's why I listed these. We finance the purchase of the van. We have the scale, the servers that we leased to own. We have the Mac lab that we're at the end of 3-year lease. We're going to have to renew that, and those all came up to the school committee. So it's kind of double. It's a double sided conversation here in terms of my ability to enter into this, or do we want to have it that any kind of lease agreement comes to the school committee? And I know you like to have things ahead of time, but at the same time would like to get these defibrillators ordered, and so that's why I'm looking for some guidance from the group. And that's why Scott said put it on, it would be a good conversation to have.
I mean, I kind of, my parallel is at the building committee, there's a certain amount of up to a certain amount of money that I can sort of authorize the project to go forward before it needs to go back to the full building committee. And I was telling Katie, I think both she and I were a little uncomfortable signing on to lease. We've never had sort of an understanding as what's the threshold,
right,
or should we just bring all leases to this group?
Any guidance or thoughts, Ms. Stout?
Am I understanding that there's some money left for the building of this building committee for any of that, or not?
No.
Okay.
Not.
So the question is just lease or purchase, is that what you're saying?
No, we have the means. We're going, I would recommend that we do a 3-year interest-free, finance it, we own it at the end of 3 years or 4, we go either way. And as I said, there's a warranty for 8 years. But then when I went to sign something, I thought, wait a minute, I'm obligating the district for 3 years myself, where, so that's what it was just, do you want all the leases to come before you for approval?
Got a head nod over here.
Yeah, I don't, that's why we're here, because that's why we stopped,
Mr. Duval?
More out of protection for you than anything else. Something of this value really should come before the school committee.
Yeah, which is great. Which leads me to my next dilemma in terms of, in terms of bringing things to you and then approving them at another meeting. We have this proposal together that I've been sitting on for a couple of weeks to get it on the agenda. We have some defibrillators that really, I think Cheryl would support this, that we want to get these, I'd rather not have to wait till the next meeting to get these on your agenda, if you could, so that's what I gave you the date down below.
We don't have an action item to necessarily do this fall.
I would move that we authorize the business manager to sign the 4-year lease for defibrillators to be in compliance with state law.
I would second that.
Ms. Long?
I have a question.
Discussion. Ms. Long?
Discussion. The discussion would be lease to own. My understanding that there's been a requirement to increase the amount of these devices that are in our school, in each individual school, and or some of the ones we do have are outdated and need to be replaced.
So this is phase 1. I would say
Okay.
the second one is being phase 2, which will become, the law goes into effect on July 1st, 2018. So what this is replacing outdated ones that we currently have. We have the ones here with the high school, the new construction, some of those are not needing to be replaced. But in the buildings that do need to be replaced, that's what we'll be doing. So it's swapping out and getting us where we need to be, although Cheryl and I, we both think that perhaps Howard Elementary may need an additional one, but we could do that in July. And then in July, I'll be back adding to this, because it has to do with if we had a football game and a soccer game going on at the same time, do you need to have 2 within a certain footage of the event? So that it's a brand new law.
We need to increase the amount we have on property.
Yep.
We need to replace the ones that are outdated, which then brings me to 3-year lease to own, 8-year warranty. How long do these devices actually last before they are outdated?
Well,
Again.
the warranty is 8 years. We have some that are over 8 years old, and we will have service contracts with the company. I don't know the life of them beyond 8 years. I think that it would be, I'm sure in 8 years the technology is going to be even much more advanced than what we demonstrated in our office. It was amazing, how user-friendly these items are.
I'm just wondering, are we're leasing for 3 or 4 years? Are we going to have to replace them again in 3 years once we've now already owned these?
No, we're
what's the life?
financing, so it's, and then,
So-
for 8, no, they'll at least last 8 years.
They'll at least last 8
Yes.
years. So we'll have 5 years of not financing and before we have to do this again.
Right, and what we'll have at the end of that will be some kind of, I'm sure, a service contract.
Okay.
But not for the purchase, but a service.
Perfect. I didn't mean to put you on the spot at
Oh,
all.
no.
I just
No.
was just thinking about a couple things. All right, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Stout?
When you're talking about tying up money and obligations for the future, personally, it's always my preference to pay off everything we can pay off as early as possible, because we don't know what's going to be there later for problems.
So we don't have, the cost is $22,000. We don't have $22,000 budgeted for that.
Mr. Duval?
0% loans are a wonderful thing.
Oh, is that loan? Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Okay, great.
clarification, 4-year lease? Or both we're doing?
Oh, no, I just wanted to provide you with the
Okay.
numbers of if it's 3
Because
years
your
or 4
motion,
years.
his motion is the 4-year. Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the table for a 4-year lease. for
And
the-
with cardiac science.
with cardiac science. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? There you go.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Thank you. All right, so then we move on to subcommittee reports. And the policy subcommittee has a report? Or not? We will move on to the
right.
superintendent's report. Oh, Ms. Douch?
I guess I would just say that they've been diligently working.
You
and
have been meeting.
We've had at least 3 meetings and worked on numerous things. So when this does come to you, you're going to have a lot of policies to look through, but some of them are minor changes.
Okay.
Got about 15 right now.
Fantastic. We'll do those at the workshop.
Okay.
No, just kidding, just kidding. All right, then we move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Carpenter?
So, since last we met, we had a building committee meeting. At the building committee, the building committee asked me to send a letter to Fontaine Brothers demanding that they fix the HVAC system in a certain number of days. I think the letter that I sent them was 15 days, and it just ended, or I'll fix it myself, which had Ed McManus have visions of me on the roof with a tool belt. But the long and short is, just let the contractors know that we're holding $30,000 of their money. Please fix these things, or we will go take the money and hire somebody to fix it. We may even have to augment correcting some of the stuff that's wrong. The biggest issue from our forensic HVAC electromechanical engineer that looked at this is there is a sensor that was put in after the fact. It was supposed to be in the units when they were built, called a freestat, and it senses whether the cabinet is getting so cold that the unit needs to shut itself down to protect the coil from freezing. And so ideally that freestat should know that it's really cold and shut it down, but we'd have these things shutting down in the middle of the summer when clearly it's not freezing. And it turns out, according to our HVAC consultant, that the company installed these on the wrong side of the coil. So I suspect it was a easier installation because I think where this could be pricey is it probably takes about 4 different trades to get it on the other side of the coil, because somebody will have to cut sort of access panels in and install a door and then reach take it out from one side, put it in the other, and then somebody's gonna have to insulate after the panel's been put in, and then somebody's gonna have to go program. So it may take 4 different trades, 4 consecutive days on the roof of the building to get through the 15 different units. So we're awaiting feedback from the contractors on, are they going to fix it, or are we going to have to reach out and go contract with somebody else to get it fixed, and then let the feathers fly after that. So that's where we are on HVAC updates. On parent meetings, I put out an invitation for parents to come meet. We had we've had in the different meetings and then some emails that I had gotten from parents that said, sorry, I couldn't be at the meeting. I've heard back from about 20 different parents at these combined. I would have loved to say I've heard from 20 parents at each one of these meetings, but we've had between 1 and 7 parents at the different meetings. Each one has had its own little flavor. At the middle school meeting, the dominant theme was buses. In fact, I don't think anybody wanted to talk about anything but buses. I asked at each of the meetings how the start times have gone. I've heard from 3 of the 20 families just concerns about how expensive after-school care is for the family, and that the shift in start time has been a financial stretch for the families. And I also have, of those 20 voices, I have only heard one parent express the start time's really doesn't seem to be working for my child. I think the bulk of the families at both the elementary level and the secondary level have indicated that the change in start times seems to be very positive for their child, and I think there's some indication that for some of the kids at the middle school, it's kind of hit or miss whether or not the change of the start time has been beneficial. I also, in each of the meetings, have been sharing with the parents just my concerns on, we'll call it the future of elementary education in our 2 towns, and just the demographics facing Chatham. I also reached out and had a conversation with Tim Woods after speaking with the select boards too. So there was an article that Tim wrote, and I thought it was pretty balanced in terms of the conversation that we had. I've been sort of sharing with families that I see this. We have 3 options ahead of us, and they're all, in many ways, connected to the regional agreement. We can choose to do nothing, and if we do nothing, odds are, in a very short period of time, over the next 4 or 5 years, we'll likely see Chatham Elementary go to 2 sections per grade level, and have talked about and heard from parents on the pros and cons. And I actually think that many of the families that I've heard from, even those families that don't have a child at Chatham Elementary School, I think do wonder whether having just 2 classes of first graders really provides a large enough peer group for kids to have sort of a dynamic friend group. And I know that those on the committee that may have come up through Chatham Elementary School may have been at that place at some point in your time. So so I think that's one sensitivity that folks have had. Another option that I have discussed with families is, do we, if the regional agreement was amended, look towards some sort of, we'll call it redistricting, in that if we were to have a bus load of students that currently is heading to Harwich Elementary School, head to Chatham Elementary School, it would bring in roughly 10 kindergartners, 10 first graders, 10 kids at each grade level, which would allow Chatham Elementary to kind of maintain that 3rd class, and at the same time help Harwich Elementary not be the biggest elementary school on the Cape. So to have it be sort of a smaller elementary school, and maybe a slightly more intimate elementary school than it currently is, with 6 sections per grade level. And then shared with families a 3rd option, which is looking at a situation where there would be sort of an upper and lower elementary school, where you could envision Harwich Elementary School being a pre-K, K1, 2 school, and then Chatham Elementary could be a grade 3 and grade 4 school, so all of the first graders are together, and shared with them sort of what I think are some of the educational benefits is that you've got all the first graders are together, the peer groups are going to be as big as it can be, but you also have all your first grade teachers together that can collaborate. It also comes with some costs, and shared with people, that means that we'd have to go and add about 8 bathrooms, 8 sort of single stall bathrooms into either one elementary school or the other elementary school, because all of our preschool and kindergarten classrooms have that bathroom, because at that age some of the kids just can't make it down the hall in time, and you want to have Yeah, and that's an upfront cost that, that we'd have to deal with, and it's not like we can go into the basement and connect up to the sewage line. It's that line's going through a slab, and it would get costly to get into that slab in 8 different rooms. So so there's costs there, but then there's also busing costs that we'd have to figure out. What does busing look like if we've got now 3 different runs that buses need to make? So I'll be penning something, sending out to families to help better educate them, maybe inspire more than 20 people to come to the next session that we'll have. So I've already kind of put out there to families that we'll have a session Saturday, November 4th, so not this coming Saturday, but a week out, at 9 a.m. at Harwich Elementary School. And then given that this group is going to be meeting on the 9th, I'll also put something out, and we'll look at having another session, I think, on Wednesday evening, November 8th, that we can have at either the middle school or the high school to, again, try to meet families when they might be free. But and then I was thinking it would probably also be good after I send it out and people get a chance to digest what it is that we're saying, to maybe do a little bit of a survey of our parent group, just to at least be able to go into your regional agreement workshop with some sort of pulse on where are our parents with this.
Questions, Ms. Dowd?
How long does it, I really like the idea of surveying the parents, because then you get hopefully information from everybody. How long does it take to put that together, the results? Does the program do it itself?
Yeah, it's just, you
Okay.
can watch it live.
Sounds great.
Watch and click in. Any other questions, Mr. Carpenter? It's such an important issue that I don't think parents are even paying attention to. You have to wonder how many parents actually read the Chronicle to see the article, to follow along. Because I'm trying to think of, other than you sent out the newsletter or the inviting parents to come, and unless you read the whole thing, you're not going to read what the topics were. It was just, come have a conversation with me, and maybe they didn't want to. I don't know. But it is, we have to try to figure out a way to get more parents involved in the conversation.
I think a challenge, even, I would say it's from the conversations I've had, it's very hard to judge the pulse of those parents. That there wasn't one of those 3 options that people are like, I hate that, yeah. or there's that option would be good. It's been sort of we'll call it lukewarm, unless I was to say your street that you're living on is going to get redistricted. Then maybe there might be some emotional.
Well, so maybe that would be a thought, is to say, all right, these would be 2 options of us being
I'll
able
just
to
randomly
pull.
pick an elementary bus in Harwich and say,
This is the one. I bet you parents would be kind to those. Mr. Russell.
I see the issue, similar to start time. It took a couple of years for us to, and I don't want to say sell it to the community, but at least raise the level of knowledge base. And that was good time. I know some of us said, gee, some districts would do it last year, and it would have been done. Instead, we did the wait that whole last year. We had a lot of high school students with petitioning about, gee, this isn't a good idea. And I've not attended any of these meetings, but my sense is that start time in 4 schools has been far more positive received than an uproar. So that buying the 1 year for them to digest it with a handful of parents coming out probably was to our advantage. This issue, one of the good pieces of news regarding the issue is we've got a couple of years to teach mothers and dads in both towns that about what we're talking about. Now, whether or not the biggest turnout that I think would be curriculum night at the Chatham Elementary, curriculum night, or whatever it's called, open house at Harwich Elementary, that might be an opportunity next year to have a half-hour carve-out for the crowd to go into some bigger room and give it another shot for next year. And you might get a crowd of them saying, at least I understand the issue. So, and I think the number issues regarding the two elementary schools, the sections, we can easily buy 2 years as this thing works out, so that might be a help.
Mr. Duvall?
I like that you're having it on a Saturday morning where, most parents aren't working, and I'm sure there are a lot in the service industry that might be, but it's good that it's on Saturday. Is Robin reaching out to her families to say, go to Harwich and have a conversation?
Yeah, we've kind of just let people know, find a time that's convenient.
Yeah.
Not that it has to be at your school. Although I am a little concerned. The last time I did a Saturday coffee, I think Joy might have been there, but I think I brought 24 donuts and 2 big boxes of Joe.
Oh, wait, you bring donuts?
Only on the Saturday.
I'm only hearing coffee.
I think there might have been 3 people. Yeah.
I think if you put hot buttons here, redistricting and donuts, you will have your
That's the
people.
title of your next email.
Redistricting and donuts.
I do appreciate how you're doing the morning, you're doing first thing in the morning, you are doing evenings and on the Saturdays to try to reach the different groups. I think that's important, and not just an evening this long.
Well, I was just going to say that, and I think it's mostly part of our job too, but as school committee members, knowing this information, we got to start getting out into the community, to our voters, and start the conversation that, hey, this is what's going to start happening. Start having a conversation now. Start learning about it, coming to the meetings, listening to the meetings, going to these, because this is what's going to start happening. And before you know it, you're going to have your opinions, and I don't want it to be too late. It's regionalization all over again, just on a smaller scale. And before we know it, we're going to probably have more attention to this topic than we want. It's going to come all at once. So hopefully that we can go out and start talking to our communities and kind of start the conversations and answer the questions they might have.
Any other questions or comments? Are you reported out?
I think we're good.
All right, so we have one action item, and this is to vote on the superintendent's goals for Mr. Carpenter for the school year 2017-2018 that were presented, about a month ago. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move to approve the superintendent's goals 2017-2018 as
you.
presented to the school committee.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Sheehan?
Sheehan, when we look at South Carolina, Sheehan here.
Sheehan abstains. And otherwise it is unanimous. Right? Yes. Only thing left is adjourn. Anybody like to make a motion for that?
Motion to adjourn.
There he is. Hello, Mr. Caffrey.
Sorry, get involved in that.
Well, there's a wall in the way.
In a second? We are not discussing that. All those in favor? Aye. And there's not going to be anybody saying no or abstaining. That is unanimous. We are adjourning at 8:23. Thank you very much.
So is it going to be another?
Good night, everybody.
Weekend?
Drive safe.